everyone, and welcome to this shorthand training session. This is a special masterclass on the Scrollmation sections. So today we'll be looking at the background Scrollmation section and also the Scrollmation section as well. We'll look at a number of different examples of how both of these sections has been used by other customers and what works well. And then we'll also look at creating some of these sections as well. So you can just kind of peer under the bonnet and see how you might be able to create these sections yourself. So I'm just going to close this window and actually just go over onto this story that I've created. I'm going to run through today. So firstly, what are the Scrollmation sections? Well, as I mentioned, there's two of them. So firstly, you have the background Scrollmation section, and that allows you to have one or multiple full screen background images and a text column over the top. And that can be to the left or the right or the center, really depending on where the focal point of your images is going to be. Then as the reader scrolls, if you have more than one image, that image will change. If you have one image in the background, then that image will just say static in the background there. The other section is the Scrollmation section. So, and this works in kind of two different ways. So it works slightly differently on desktop as it does on mobile. And this is where you can have a column of text to the left or the right hand side, and then on the opposing side you have one or multiple images in a column. And then as the reader scrolls, if you have more than one image, they change again. And then we'll look at some of the differences as well on mobile. You can actually have a couple of choices on mobile. You either have your image at the top of the screen on mobile, or you can actually place it in line as well. So as I said, the first thing I'm going to do is just look through a number of different examples of these sections and how other people have used them. So hopefully it will serve as inspiration to how you might be able to create some of these sections yourselves. And then I'll create some Scrollmation sections as well myself, just to show you how it all works. So firstly, let's look at some examples then. So I've broken it down into kind of the use types and then looked across at both the background and the Scrollmation section as well. So I've got about 2 stories for each of these examples. So the first one is a BBC example, and it's the story that they did about the voting in Congress fairly recently. So this is quite a simple use of the Scrollmation section. So you see we start with the normal title section here, and then we go into the the Scrollmation section, and we've got this 2-column setup here. And then as we scroll through, they've just got one image here, and then we go on to the next section. So that's kind of one of the most simplest types of use of this section. Again, the second example I wanted to show you, again, is just using one image. So this is a story by Source Media, and this is a publication called American Banker they create. And then we have a text section here before we go into a background Scrollmation section. Again, this has one image that sits in the background. This is slightly longer in length, has more text in it than the other one. You scroll through that before going on to the next section there. So just closing that and then returning to my story. The next couple of use cases I wanted to show you are galleries. So both the background Scrollmation and the Scrollmation sections are a great way to create galleries so that you can basically have your readers scrolling through your text, and as they scroll through it will change, and then they can see lots of different images. So the first example is by Penguin Books, very well known, and this is a story looking at lots of different books basically, and kind of their storytelling over the years as well. So there's a number of different photos here that they wanted to include of lots of different books, and here you can see this in the Scrollmation section. As we scroll through, the images change, and then also in the story they have a kind of a history part really. You kind of start with an image of a person, and then you scroll through lots of different images of their books as well. And they do that a lot with the story. The other example I wanted to show you is this example by Woodland Trust. And this again is a Scrollmation section. And here we have some really fantastic looking vintage photos here actually. So they scan those in and then use them in this piece, made sure that they're all the relevant sizes, following the media guidelines within Shorthand, so that as you scroll through, can kind of see this very short gallery of these kind of vintage photos. And they do also use a background scrollmation in this section as well. You also would have seen a very nice effect here. I won't go into this one too much. I will go through this example actually in our upcoming webinar, which is about the text over media section, and that's actually created the text over media section. All I wanted to focus on today was the other use of the scrollmation sections, which is a background scrollmation this time, a little bit further on. And this is a really nice effect that they've used here. So they've got these interviews with various people that they've talked to in relation to the trees here that they're talking about. And they've just used a nice effect here, just 2 images. You've got 1 image of their person, and then you scroll through, and then you flick automatically to the next image of that person. It sort of acts as a little close-up on them. And again, you've got the same here. It works really well. Sort of a gallery of those people that you're kind of zooming in on those. Makes it really personal. So the next couple of examples are animation. Creating animation can be a really good way of using the scrollmation sections. And often these can be really engaging to the readers as well. So unlike using GIFs, for example, where the GIFs obviously move and change on their own and you don't need to do anything to them, you're actually fully in control of making these sections animate yourself. There's a couple of that. It's all background scrollmations in these ones as well, and they do use some static imagery as well, but often it's quite simple, just a few changes of the image here to give you that effect as you scroll through. As you can see, I was just scrolling up there as well, just to make that change in reverse. And they use that all the way through this article as well. And it works really well. A very similar example is this story by Red Barna, which is Save the Children in Norwegian, sorry. And this is a story all about the campaign around clothing and raising awareness about that. And there's some really nice features in here, again, using the background scrollmation, where they've taken a series of images of these clothing and then put them into the scrollmation section one by one, so that as you scroll through, it gives the illusion that these clothes are actually kind of turning round. Next up is data visualization. So again, these scrollmation sections can be a great way to visualize the data. So make it more engaging, make it more interesting, rather than just serving a static kind of flat image to a reader. You can make it more interesting and make it kind of grow as you move through the story, which I'll just show you with this example. So this is a story by Thought Leadership Consulting. There is another story that I'll show you by these guys as well. They're very good at kind of showing the data in these stories. So basically the way that they've done this, again, is a series of images put into this section with these very subtle changes, so that as you scroll through, the data actually builds as you go, until ultimately you've got to the end of this section, and then you've built all the data up there. And again, they do that here as well, making these charts move. So the designer has really thought here about how you can make subtle differences in these images. I believe they used Photoshop to make all of these, but that's not to say that you couldn't use a free service like Canva or maybe something like PicMonkey to actually create very similar images in this kind of style as well. Another example of, actually this is both data visualization and a bit of animation as well, and it's this particular section which is really, really great. I'm sure you'll agree. So it's a scrollmation this time, so the column setup, and as we scroll through, and they've really thought about how they're going to add in all of these images, by the way, because this is the very first image. And if I just scroll through this really quickly just to show you the full effect of it, so kind of get this idea of these components stacking here. And if you're seeing this for the first time and perhaps you're not kind of digging under the surface, it would be very easy to think that this is a GIF. It works really, really well. You could almost think it's a video because it's so smooth in its transition. But what they've actually done is every single change here is an image. So they've really thought about how to have each of those micro movements in there. And you could say, well, why wouldn't they have that in a GIF instead? I mean, you could serve this in a GIF instead. The advantages of that would be that it's perhaps slightly easier to create, I guess, because you could create a video, kind of have an animation person setting that up for you and then drop that in. But the problems with GIFs are they are very large files. So actually, you're going to increase the load of the story automatically. So it could mean that you get a buffering effect for readers. And also GIFs, we find that they aren't as engaging as well because it's reducing the interactivity with the story. So as a reader, if this was a GIF, I wouldn't be actually powering this movement myself. And that's what we find that makes these really engaging, is that the readers are actually completely in control of how fast or how slow they digest this information and make it move. Next up, I wanted to show you a couple of timeline examples. Again, very good section for timelines. So the first one I'll show you is one by Gosh. And this is a timeline created using a Scrollmation section, so the 2-column setup here. And as we scroll through, so what they've done there, that's the first image. The second image has 1938 added to it. The third image, they've added 1941. And then the next one's very clever. They actually cut the image at the top, so it gives the illusion that the timeline is actually moving up the page, but it's just the cropping of the photos. And then they add in the next date below. Now, just because of time, I can't kind of show the contrast between every example on mobile and desktop. And I will send all of these links over as well, so you can explore them in your own time as well and become familiar with kind of how they've been put together and created, if you did want to, kind of maybe take inspiration from these. So this is how this particular one works on mobile. And this is the inline option that I mentioned. So there are two choices for mobile. You can either have the images at the top of the screen and then they change, and I will show you how to do this later on, or you can have them inline. So within this particular example here, what they've done is they've got the images inline. So they've broken it up there, and then they've put in the images between the most relevant piece of text. So this is the view that you would get on mobile for this particular story. That's what they decided to do there. The other timeline I wanted to show you is one by Honda. And this is particularly clever. It's very nice. Again, it's very much in the way that they've put the images together that really make it shine. So this is a background Scrollmation section, and it has one static image that sits in the background. And then they've got the column to the center of the screen, and all they've done here, so they actually haven't put any text in this text section. What they've done is they've just placed a number of inline images, one after the other. And one of the things I really like about this one is the consistency. Now, each image block, if I just show you by taking a screenshot here, each image block is that's what each image has been placed into shorthand as. But because of the way they've designed it with these little dots here on each corner and also the red line, it creates a really nice consistent timeline as you scroll through the page. So that's another way of doing it. And the way that this one would work on mobile is it would just feature, so you'd have the background image in the background, and this would come partially into sight at the top, and then the timeline would come over it. Next couple of examples I want to show you are about layering images. So this is Ghost in the Machine. This is the first, so I showed you Ghost in the Machine Revisited a second ago, but this is actually the first version of that story. And this is a really quite a nice effect that they've created here, where you've got this image in the background, you've got this kind of filter over it that's red over these buildings, and then as you scroll through, what they've done is the same image and they've applied this filter to it and started to almost blur it out, and then again, and then just to show you the step change there. It's about 5 images in total before going pretty much almost red, and then you go into the next section. And then the other kind of layering is actually enabling you to highlight certain things within an image. So for this one, they've started with all of the information that they're going to deliver to you, but then they've made this a different color. And then as you scroll down, the second image is effectively very similar, except for now they've grayed out this part of the image and they've highlighted this part. So it's just a wonderful way of delivering that information to you in a kind of a slower manner, and also highlighting the most relevant parts of those stats at one time. It works really well. Finally, on the layering, I wanted to show you this story, which is by Sydney Opera House. It's about dance rights, which was a festival that they ran fairly recently. And again, this is a very just a subtle thing here. You'll see that they actually have a text fade in as you approach this section as well. I'll show you how to create that later on. And then what they've done here is they've got an image in the background, and then as you scroll through, the same image, but the colors change. And again, it's more of a kind of a stylized kind of visual aspect to it, and they've added in a fade there as well to make that transition kind of slower, but just a really, really nice visual effect there that you can create. And just little things like that can really wow audiences. So now I've shown you those examples, I'm just going to make a couple of Scrollmation sections myself now, just to show you how you can do those. So if I just go back into my account, and then I'm just going to go on to the story that we've just been working on, but within the editor itself. And then I'm going to add in a background Scrollmation section at first. I'm actually just going to switch my theme here as well to Shorthand Basic. I just like the colouring for the particular effect that I'm going to make. So with the background Scrollmation, to edit the media, you just click here, and then you can delete all of the images like so. And then I'm just going to add in some images here. I'm going to start with an eagle. So the eagle from our homepage. I've got a number of still shots taken from some video that I'm just going to upload into Shorthand. Push that over to that side, just so you can see the full effect of what I've done there. So I've just got a number of still shots taken from our homepage, just in case you're not familiar with it. It's just this eagle here. And then what's happening, if I just save and exit and show you how this works, is the eagle is going to fly from one side of the screen to the other. So quite a simple animation there, using a number of still images from some video. I'll show you another background Scrollmation now. I want to talk a little bit about the fades and how you can use those as well for various effects. So they're just going to go to another one. Just wait for this to save. I'm actually just going to toggle this on to dark on light as well, as I think that's going to work better, just the colouring for this particular section in line with the images. And then what I've got here is I've got 3 images, one with nothing. The second one, I've got a lady here who's been partially faded, and then the next image, she comes fully into view. So with that fading effect in something like Photoshop or Canva, you can sort of even kind of emphasize that even more by using the fades within Shorthand. So obviously if you're going to create an animation, like a flipbook animation type effect, you don't really want to be using the fades here, because the idea is that you want that transition to be really quick and seamless. a bit like the boxes that we saw, the components in that story kind of building from top to bottom. You want it to be really, really quick. Whereas if you're wanting to maybe create sort of a gentle fading transition between these kind of highlighting effects that you've put on images, then that's where this fade can really work very well as well. Now, and the way that this would work on mobile, as you saw with a couple of the examples that we had a look at, is that with the background scrollmation, the image comes partially into view at the top of the screen, like so, and then actually the text comes over the top, and then in the background, the transition will still be happening. So you will see the eagle in a second flying across the screen. But obviously the text is much more in the forefront, so you don't really want to be having anything that requires a key focal point there. So if there's key information for the story, you don't really want to have it sitting behind the text, so it's not going to be readable. The other thing that you really want to think about as well is adding some mobile crops for these sections. So for example, with these eagle images, if I just open up the edit media here, I can see, if I go to right here, that the eagle is fully in view here, but for the portrait crop, because we take an automatic crop for the mobile screens, that the eagle is not in view yet. So what you do need to think about is taking some alternative mobile crops here that you can add them in, so you're going to get that same transition or a similar transition on mobiles, that you're tailoring that effect for your readers. So just to show you a couple of Scrollmation sections as well now. So again, to edit the media, you just go to edit media here, delete all of the images that are here already, and then you can add in your own. So this time I'm going to add in some images of Paris. These are aerial images taken from a video that's kind of scanning across Paris. And you will see I've got this performance alert here. So just a little bit into that. So all of the media guidelines within Shorthand have been written very much in the view of making sure that your stories perform to their absolute best across all devices. Now, part of that is keeping the kind of weight of the stories as little as possible, as down as much as you can. So for the videos, for example, we recommend 2 megabytes per 5 seconds. And for all of the section types, we have specific guidelines for all of these images, which you can see by just opening here. And then also within these sections, we say that we'd recommend no more than 10 images per section. Now, a slight caveat to that, and it's really on to you to kind of use your own intuition here, and I would use mine if I was creating this story for myself. Now, I have more than 10 images in here. There's quite a few images here. There's about 28 in total, so I'm going quite a bit over that 10 image per section there. But my argument would be that this story isn't actually very long. I haven't got any other heavy media or videos really in here, so I would be happy, as long as I've tested this across different devices, that it's going to work really, really well. And actually, I really like this effect. Now, I do create a similar effect on background Scrollmation using less images, but I do really like the kind of micro changes in this. It makes this transition between this really, really smooth. Now, you would have to think about how you want this to appear on mobile as well. And as I mentioned, there are 2 ways in which you can have Scrollmation on mobile. So what I'll do is I'll show you with a different Scrollmation section, because actually it doesn't actually work very well with this one, because the reason being is that the aspect ratio isn't quite right for the mobile when you have it on the top of the screen, as it needs to be 16:9. But I'll just make another Scrollmation section and show you that, because I can kind of show you the difference between them then. So if I just create another one, and I'm just going to remove the media again. And then this time I'm going to create a bit of a chart, the pie chart starting from nothing. And that slowly builds up. You see you can move images around once you add them in as well, like so, if you need to. So here are my charts. I've added them in. So we start with nothing. So that's a blank image that I've added in on purpose there. And then we slowly build this pie chart. So this is just for demonstration purposes, so there's no data on this particular one. If I just save that and then take this to mobile, what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to show you the alternative here as well. So what I'm going to do is just click place Scrollmation image inline here. So this is one way you can have it on mobile, and then I'm going to leave this one as its default just to show you how they work in contrast. So here's my first one. So what's happening here is I've got my text is starting at the top here, and then I've got that first image placed in line here. And then further down, I've got my image at the top of the screen. So I start with my blank image, and then I just add in, as I scroll, these images build. So the kind of reasons why you might decide to use the place Scrollmation image is if you are using images that are very portrait aspect ratios, they're not really going to work for the guidelines here for 16:9 for mobile phone devices. So what I would need to consider here is perhaps just having one image that I've actually cropped and made it sort of either a different aspect ratio so I can keep that nice animation and it's not portrait, or I would just have one image and then have it in line, as just the kind of crop of this for the top of the mobile phone, considering the amount of space you have, is not going to work as well. Whereas if you have more of a kind of landscape orientated images like these, then these are going to work really well for mobile. But you could actually decide if you wanted to, if you didn't want to create that animation on mobile, you could again decide to have these placed in line within the column as well. So that's all we've got time for today in terms of what I have time to show you. But I know there's a couple of questions that have come through as well. So I'm just going to have a little peek of those and try and answer any of those. So if you can hang around and listen, if you did answer any questions, that would be great. Otherwise, if you do have to head off, I hope you found today's session useful. I will be following up with lots of links as well so that you can have a look at those in your own time, and have a great day.